I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
This show was something that exceeded my expectations by a lot.
This is definitely now in my top 10.
Because I'm just going to come right out and say it. Arcane is a 10 out of 10. It's a fucking 10 out of 10 show.
But I really am loving this show so far. Those are just kind of my rambly thoughts at this time.
Arcane is just damn fucking good, entertaining entertainment.
It's hard to explain this, but the intricacies of the narrative are so well woven together that as you watch the new episode, the last episode becomes even more relevant and even better as you're thinking of it.
I think this is easily one of the best pieces of media that I've ever consumed.
It has been a little bit over 1 year since the critically acclaimed title Arcane was released. To say it has broken many records and revolutionized the video game adaptation genre would be an understatement. In many people's eyes, Arcane is the wake-up call for Western media to finally adopt animated creations. It brings adaptive and cohesive characters to such an already in-depth world that the writers of the show make so easy to understand. It has brought crowds to an awe with spectacular and aesthetically pleasing cinematography, along with its jaw-dropping action scenes and animation design. It's composed of many narratives and perspectives of different characters which turn out to work together so seamlessly. Although its origination is from the game League of Legends, as a viewer, you don't even need to play the video game once to understand it. I haven't even played the video game once in my life, and yet the show still holds true to being one of my favorite films of all time. The show makes you have deep emotional connections with the characters. It leaves you craving more after each episode. Its character dynamics are unmatched, and it may or may not even make you question your sexuality.
You're hot, Cupcake.
Arcane is filled with themes of civil unrest, sister rivalry, abandonment, loneliness, psychosis, political discourse, mommy issues, daddy issues, and the list goes on and on. Anyways, in this video, I want to directly review the impact and purpose the show gave audiences a year ago and see if that still remains true today. This is Arcane, 1 year later, and how it broke the video game curse. I want to start by talking about pacing. Google defines pacing as to move or develop something at a particular rate of speed. Pacing is undoubtedly one of the most important aspects that can make or break a film production. With too slow pacing, audience retention rates plummet as their interest rates begin to recede. With too fast pacing, it can often leave viewers bombarded with way too much information too quickly and ultimately leave them wanting more. Yet, Arcane is a spectacle that fits directly within both. With an audience score of 96% and a critic rating of a flawless 100%, Arcane broke the record for the highest IMDb rating a Netflix show has ever gotten.
What nonsense!
Not to mention their 9 Annie Award nominations for Best Game Adaptation. Arcane is such a well thought out story that offers the viewer with such deep emotional connections with the characters, combined with incredible storytelling, cohesive animation tactics, and surreal jaw-dropping visuals, very much worthy of its critical acclaim. The way the writers of Arcane structure the series is through 3 varying yet crucial acts over the course of 9 episodes. This equates to approximately 6 hours. And yes, it only takes 6 hours for the writers to develop such a cohesive narrative across a timeline of seemingly 10 years or so. It definitely leaves the viewers in awe. With as many storylines and plots that the show has, it yet instills an attachment to each and every character. It's quite incredible. The writers make each and every plot within the show purposeful. For example, no fight scene is left untalked about, no event is made in isolation to the rest of the story, but most importantly, no pointless scene without a relation to the story is ever made. This is what makes Arcane a crucial, and in my opinion, a revolutionary production around animated frameworks. Finally, I want to point out the structure in which Arcane is constructed around. The 3-act structure, otherwise known as the formulaic structure, which is also known as the we are born, we struggle, we die structure. Now, many shows with the formulaic structure tend to dissipate into the ever-growing industry due to their nature of having very much expected plot twists and lack of originality. This often leaves viewers unsatisfied with the execution and overall storytelling of a show. This leaves me to beg the questions of, why isn't Arcane a failure? If Arcane follows the formulaic structure, why is it seen as such a storytelling masterpiece? What makes it so revolutionary, or even genre-breaking? This essay will explore those points in detail and try to extract some of the remaining answers. The show begins with a gruesome scene showcasing Powder and Vi and their connection to their soon-after adoptive father, Vander. This scene at first is an establishment into the overall conflict between the two geographical plotlines of Piltover and Zon. Piltover is the upper part of the city filled with magnificent wealth and power, while its counterpart, Zon, is a city overrun with criminal drug lords and filthy environments. This is also where Vi and Powder live. Though, through a more detailed look, the first scene can be clearly deducted as the beginning of childhood trauma for both sisters, but especially Powder. With the overarching motif of Powder's soon-to-be ulterior persona, Jinx, the animator spectacularly captured her foreshadowing through her iconic sporadic line drawings as a symbol of traumatic experience. They also spectacularly capture the true appeal of pathos through the sense of such immense emotion without even one word being said. Yes, not one word was said in dialogue until a little past minute 4 of the episode, where we are initially introduced to the main characters. This further solidifies my point that the writers are concise and direct with how they want their audience to perceive the narrative. One of the writers of the show, in fact, Amanda Overton, once said in an interview that the writing process of Arcane was a constant process of improvement and change to make sure it all works together seamlessly in the end. And I have to say, Amanda, your team definitely shattered expectations. After the first scene of the first episode, we see Vi and Powder and their adopted brothers, Milo and Clagger. They are seen breaking into the apartment of the later established Jace. They came looking for valuables that they could sell in the Undercity, which is when they run into a slight problem. Powder sees a mysterious box which leads her to open it. Inside are glowing crystals that end up blowing up the building when Powder accidentally drops one of them. This causes enforcers to chase after them into the Undercity. After they nearly escape, they're confronted with someone that works for Silco, who is the villain of the show. This leads to a pretty intense fight that leaves Powder in shock, but nonetheless, she ends up getting chased and is forced to throw the bag with the crystals into the ocean. Later on, they travel back down to the Undercity where Vander is properly introduced and gives Vi a lesson on how they could have gotten killed. So with the base storyline already established, the writers can already begin to work around that and form a cohesive framework of how steady they want to progress their storyline. Throughout episode 1, we are given the intricate setup of most characters from the Undercity and their respective arcs. We have Vi and Powder and their sisterhood along with Milo and Clagger as supporting roles to further create a sense of a family dynamic. We also have Vander, the father figure known as the
Hound of the Underground. I expected something younger.
We also have Echo, who is friends with Vi and Powder, and also has exclusive insight into private conversations with topsiders. Then we have Grayson, the sheriff tasked with keeping the Undercity under control, who also has an agreement with Vander to respect each other's districts. Then her assistive counterpart, Marcus, who had no interest in their deal. Finally, we are introduced to Silco, an operative madman, very clearly characterized as the villain, scripted as an infamous drug lord whose one motive is to make Zon independent from the city of Piltover, and will just about do anything to achieve that goal.
Vander's in trouble.
In episode 2, we are introduced to the second half of the cast, including but not limited to Jace, the scholar essentially tasked with the innovation of Hextech, although this does come with its own set of consequences. His supportive colleague, Victor, who is implicitly terminally ill and will do anything to remain by Jace's side. Heimerdinger, an esteemed wise scientist whose lifespan is immortal. Then we have Mel, dare I say one of my favorite characters, a disowned heir of the Madara clan who climbed the ranks of the council and who would do anything to continue putting herself at the top. Finally, the Careman family, but more specifically Caitlin, the child of Cassandra. She's written as an excellent shot to rid the city of criminals and is often paired with Vi and their very, very close relationship to one another.
But you're so sweet. Like a cupcake.
So now that all the characters have been established within the first 2 episodes, I need you to ask yourself one question. Did you ever feel bored or uninterested during those 83 minutes? I would gather that unless you were Richard, you probably didn't hesitate to stop watching for 1 second. Why is that? What about Arcane's hook makes the viewer pledge loyalty to the show so quickly? This is when the main themes of the storyline come in. We see the duality between characters and geography, the already existing emotional connection to character dynamics, the development of the 4D character, which in layman's terms means a character that has two opposing arcs layered together in order to form two opposing characters with two opposing stories. And for some people, the most attention-grabbing detail is the stunning animation design. Keep in mind that I only listed 4 themes out of the seemingly infinite themes that the show envelops. This all combined is ultimately what makes pre-existing and most importantly new audiences join the likes of the series. It's absolutely breathtaking how many aspects of a good storytelling narrative the writers procured with such limited inspiration. After Act 1, time jump of about 6 to 7 years has happened and we are introduced to the wonders of Hextech as well as the secondary arcs of each character, mostly Vi's and Powder's, now Jinx. We are also introduced to the Firelights, which can be described as Echo's clan of Zonite recruits to make the Undercity a better place, though he's only formally introduced later on. I would argue that the introduction of Echo was mostly unnecessary, since his only screen time is dependent on action scenes and ultimately Heimerdinger's removal from Council, but I digress. Mel and Heimerdinger present Jace with a moral dilemma in which he must pick whether to reveal his new Hextech innovations or wait some time before Hextech is put into everyone's hands. Spoiler alert, he chooses the second one. We also see how the lanes have progressed since Vander's passing and Silco's rise to power, and it's not good, to say the least. Silco obviously runs on by now, with Jinx as his second hand, and their relationship is, let's say, interesting. After Jinx steals a Hextech crystal and sets off an explosion in Piltover, Mel makes the radical decision of making Jace part of the council due to his commitment to Hextech.
Perhaps the time has come to explore a more radical solution. I propose that a new chair be brought forth, and that House Talus be elevated to this august body.
Finally, we see Caitlyn's story arc progress when she meets Vi at the end of episode 4 and beginning of episode 5, with the remarkable flashback to her training with the now deceased Sheriff Grayson. With effortless flow from the previous episode, this flashback highlights Caitlyn's perfect marksmanship, which is later shown in Vi's fight with Savika. Vi's and Caitlyn's storyline is further reinforced through episode 5 when we see how Vi's physical ability is overpowering of Caitlyn's. Through this action scene, a metaphor of altitude is conveyed in which they are technically parkouring across the city of Piltover and down to the lanes where Vi's and Caitlyn's chemistry is seen for the first time. Don't get me started on all the posts and fan art I had to go through while doing my research. Yeah. Anyways, we get reintroduced to Jinx's emotional trauma through the lens of psychosis, which is a really interesting way, yet fitting way to write her character. It is definitely unlike any other movie tropes that often wrongfully depict mental instability. This show ultimately established her way of thinking early on, even as early on as the first scene of the episode with the mental line drawings that are shown. Through Jinx's persona, Silco makes an executive decision to weaponize Hextech so they could have a chance at a fight with Piltover. Little did he know this decision would lead to the finale of the show, when Jinx ultimately weaponizes Hextech. Moving on to Mel and Jace's storyline, Mel finally makes the domineering move to make Jace a love interest, further enforcing the idea that Mel is a smart yet ambitious character that will do anything in her power to remain on top. This is another trope that the Arcane writers develop effortlessly. Instead of making her the stereotypical femme fatale who achieves goals at the expense of a man, they make her the femme fatale by achieving her goals for the sake of herself. At the same time of this, we also see Victor cough more blood, but this time it reacts with the Hex Core, creating something that Victor will end up using for his own good, but at the expense of others. Nothing else really happens in this episode besides Vi's fight with Savika and... oh yeah, the awful cameo they decided to promote Imagine Dragons with? Echo is formally introduced as the leader of the Firelights, and his reunion with Vi is somewhat heartwarming. Then there's Jace being Jace, and Mel being Mel with Jace, and Mel and Jace being Mel and Jace, and Mel and Jace and Victor worrying about Hextech. You know, the usual. Then we get some subtle foreshadowing of the epic show-stopping fight that soon entails with Jinx and Echo. Then Jinx has more weird interactions with Silco. And now, the long-awaited music video everyone was waiting for, Jinx vs Echo. This fight eventually kills Marcus, which I guess we were supposed to care about, but like, we get the coolest action scene ever to cross television, so who's complaining? Finally, Season 1 of the show comes to a close, with Episode 9, titled The Monster You Created. In this episode, we see Savika's undying loyalty to Silco when she kills Finn instead of him. Tensions of Silco wanting Zahn to become independent are prominent in his conversation with Jace when he says that Jinx will have to be handed over in order for Zahn's independence to happen. Obviously, this is reminiscent of Vander protecting younger Vi and Powder for their own sake, which leaves the issue of wanting peace for both cities unresolved. This is all connected by the upcoming scenes when we see Silco talking to Vander's commemorative statue about his problem, and ultimately when Jace tells the council they've made peace in exchange for independence, which is where all hell breaks loose. They can't even control the Undercity, so why are they mad now that they have their own independence? Make it make sense. Then we see Echo and Heimerdinger share a mutual interest in saving the Undercity from destruction, which is also symbolized by the color green associated with the firelights. Then Savika and Vi share more mutual disagreements. And finally, we get the last scene where Jinx is keeping Vi and Silco hostage. She forces them to decide who she will be hereafter, Powder or Jinx. This leads to some tension between the two, and she ends up killing Silco, which leaves the door open for a new villain possibly in the next season. And this also concludes Jinx's character arc, though she could definitely be more explored in Season 2. This scene is topped off with Jinx weaponizing Hextech to launch a missile into the council's meeting space, and we are left with a cliffhanger. There's definitely many theories out there of how Season 2 could be like, but that would be outside of the scope of this video. Let me know in the comments your theories, if you have any, about Season 2. So, in summary, the series ultimately comes to an end, with leaving much room for speculation, as well as not closing many storylines, which also leaves room for audiences to speculate further. I get that many people probably found the cliffhanger ending as unsatisfactory, but this is a clever tactic to keep Arcane's audience anticipating more. I mean, I'm not making this video 1 year later because Arcane was shitty and stupid. I'm making it because as a fan, I want to see where the story goes and see if Season 2 will even be better than Season 1. It's this growing anticipation and intrigue that barely any show has ever given me or other people alike. Let's face it, Arcane is that show. Arcane is what many shows strive to be. Arcane is produced so flawlessly that people like me are still obsessing over it 1 year later. It is undoubtedly one of the best, if not the best, video game adaptation series to ever cross television. As I said previously, the character depth, the emotional connection, the insane hidden metaphors, the animation and landscape design, it's a state-of-the-art production, and I just can't wait for Season 2 to be announced. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching all the way through. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, and please consider liking and subscribing as it helps my channel grow. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later in my next video.